the synoptic problem and solutions. The synoptic problem and solutions. In this unit, we shall be examining the issue of synoptic problem, of the synoptic gospels. Synoptic gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. What do we mean by synoptic problem? What effort has scholars, biblical scholars, made in an attempt to resolve what is known as synoptic problem? Now we begin. The synoptic problem of the gospel according to St. Matthew, Mark, and Luke centers around two major issues, namely, one, how does one explain the source or sources of similarities in the accounts of the synoptic gospels? Defining synoptic problem. We've said it centers around two major issues. And we said one, how does one explain the source or sources of similarities in the accounts of the synoptic gospels? The second major issue in defining synoptic problem is this question: how does one reconcile the differences in the accounts of the synoptic gospels in terms of why certain narratives found in Mark or Luke may not be found in Mark? How does one reconcile the differences in the accounts of the synoptic gospels in terms of why certain narratives found in Mark or Luke may not be found in Mark? In other words, what are the documentary source or sources of the similarities? And what are the documentary source or sources of the differences in the synoptic gospels account? Hezemedia 2004 states the synoptic problem this way: the synoptic problem arises when one asks the question, what is the relation between the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in view of the fact that their separate accounts of the same events are given in language which is often almost word to word identical? What is the relation between the synoptic gospels in view of the fact that their separate accounts of the same events are given in language which is often almost word to word identical? About 95% of Mark is found in Matthew and Luke. When the materials from Mark is removed from Matthew and Luke, there is still a large quantity of material In other words, when the materials from Mark is taken away from Matthew, and that same material from Mark is taken away from Luke, there will remain a large quantity of material that remain common to Matthew and Luke respectively. This points to the fact that the words available to Matthew and Luke are not a source. This source, now lost, is referred to as Q by scholars. Q here, as a German word, refers to Quelle, Quelle, which means source. This Q accounts for some 200 verses in both Matthew and Luke. When all the materials from both Mark and Q are removed from Matthew and Luke, there remain Matthew's and Luke's own personal contributions to their Gospels. This is the view of Hezemedia 2004, page 21 to 22. The synoptic problem may appear in this analytic sequence. 1. What is the documentary source of Matthew and Luke if both incorporate Mark? 2. What is the documentary source of Matthew and Luke if the account of Mark and the similarities in both Matthew and Luke are removed? The solution to the synoptic problem may therefore entail the following. 1. Mark. The first gospel follows the outline of Peter concerning the life and ministry of Jesus up to his death and resurrection, which Matthew and Luke incorporated, thus explaining the similarities in the synoptic gospels. 2. Matthew and Luke used additional similar account known as Q source, which explains further the similarities in both, but not found in Mark. 3. Matthew used a second additional or peculiar account known as M source, while Luke did the same, known as L source, which ultimately explained differences in Matthew and Luke. This solution probably agrees with Hezemedia when he says Matthew's particular collection of information in his gospel is referred to as M and Luke's as L. Each of the two accounts of the gospel therefore has three main sources if presented in a tabular form. In one column we have Mark, the second column we have Q, the third column we have M above and L below, which imply Mark plus Q source plus M amounts to Matthew's account, Mark plus Q source plus L amounts to Luke's account. It is worthy to note that a few of the incidents taken from Q by Matthew and Luke are to be found in Mark. The following, for instance, are found in the record of Mark and Q source, namely John the Baptist preaching, the baptism of Jesus, sin against the Holy Spirit, the parable of the mustard seed, the mission of the disciples. Similarly, Hezemedia articulated a list of specific areas of agreement in the Synoptic Gospels. 1. In certain important facts about the life of Christ, e.g. the baptism and passion narratives. 2. In the arrangement of some elements of the story, Matthew chapter 8, verse 18, Luke chapter 8, verse 22 to 56, Mark chapter 4, verse 35 to 43. 3. In literal or literary form, Mark chapter 12, verse 1 to 4, Mark chapter 2, verse 23 to 26, Luke chapter 6, verse 1 to 4. Number 4. In Old Testament citations, Number 5, the saying of Christ, e.g. the Lord's Prayer, Matthew chapter 6, 9 to 13, Luke chapter 11, verse 2 to 4. And number 6, the institution of the Eucharist, that is Matthew 26, 26 to 28, Mark chapter 14, 22 to 24, Luke 22, verse 19 to 20. So far, we've been able to talk about the synoptic problem and its solution. And we did say it centers around two focus, or two foci. One, how does one explain the sources of similarity? How does one reconcile the differences in the synoptic narrative? And we mentioned a fine scholar, Hezemedia, in 2004, who helped to articulate the problem in a succinct manner. That what is the relationship between the synoptic gospel, in view of the fact that their separate accounts of the same event are given in language which is often almost word-to-word identical. And we also find that the synoptic problem can be articulated in this form. What is the documentary source of Matthew and Luke if both incorporate Mark? And what is the documentary source of Matthew and Luke if the account of Mark and the similarity in both Matthew and Luke are removed? And we said the solution can be explained in this manner. Mark, the first gospel, followed the outline of Peter concerning the life and ministry of Jesus. We also said Matthew and Luke use additional similar account known as Q source and explain further the similarity in both but not found in Mark. Thirdly, we said Matthew used a second additional or peculiar account known as M source, while Luke did the same known as L source, which explained the differences in Matthew and Luke. We had a table where we have Mark plus Q source plus M amounting to Matthew gospel, Mark and Q source plus L amounting to Luke's gospel. And we mention areas of similarities and areas of agreement in the synoptic narrative. Thank you for listening.